Man, it's my great pleasure to have you back here because we've spoken in the past before, AJ. Alex Jordan, the #1 agent for McGraw Estate Agents this last year running. And I believe you wrote 10 million in GCI, right?
Yeah, myself and my team, we ended up just over 10 million for the financial year, last financial year.
Over 10 million, right. So that will get you to probably the top 0.5% of agents all around the planet, right? All around the world. The numbers are absolutely amazing, but what actually fascinates me about you, Alex, AJ as I call you, is you're just a beautiful man, humble, you've got a beautiful family, a person that you can look up to and say, hey, look, this guy has got everything, everything very well done. I talk about this, AJ. I talk about being fit mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and then the roof takes care of itself. I just want you to go back and tell me, like, how did you start? How long have you been in the business? Just let us know a little bit more about yourself, AJ. Welcome to the podcast, by the way.
Well, thank you, mate. Thank you for the very generous and kind introduction. I don't have everything sorted in my life, to be quite honest with you. From the outside in, it may appear that way. And it's funny that perception is that if you're doing well, that you've got everything in your life well balanced and organized and structured, and behind the scenes, it's a lot more chaotic than what it may appear on the facade, but I'll pretend to be as good as what you think I am.
Well, none of us got it perfect. I know we all work in progress, right?
I'll try and live up to the hype. So my career started in 1999. I was a musician. I was struggling to make a living doing music. I was a keyboard player, and I needed to find a job, and I didn't know what to do because I wasn't educated. I came out of school with a fairly low grade out of year 12. So I finished high school, but underperformed. And that was partly because I wasn't dedicated, I wasn't focused, I was distracted, and a lot of reasons, but ultimately it was I had a lazy mentality about it. So got out of school, had a band, we're doing gigs in Brisbane and making very little money. As an example, we would make $100 per band member for a gig, and that would be getting there at 2 PM, setting up the speakers and spending 1 or 2 hours doing a sound check, and then coming back at 8 o'clock at night to the nightclub, doing 4 sets, leaving at 2, 3 in the morning, getting home at 3, 4 in the morning, and getting $100 per band member. So it was a lot of work. And before that day of that performance that we would have on a weekly basis, we'd have to practice and rehearse. And so I was struggling to live. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? I've got to make a living here. A friend of mine owned a car dealership, and I approached him and I said, hey, I'm looking for a job. He's like, no worries. I don't give you a retainer, but I can give you $100 for every car that you sell. And at that stage, I would have taken anything. So I said, yep, I'm in, I'll take it. Started working for him, and it worked out pretty well for me. I was selling about 7 cars a week, which was about $700 a week, which was pretty good money back in 98, 99, and it was for me anyway. But it got to a point after about month 2, he came up to me and said, look, it's not working out for me. All these customers that you're selling to would have come directly to me anyway. You're just standing outside and meeting them before I do, and sort of it's costing me more than it's benefiting me, and for that reason, I need you to find another job. I said, okay, how much time have I got? He's like, well, whenever you're ready, I'm ready. So it's like, basically, leave now is what he was saying. There was an ad in the Courier Mail back then for a real estate job, and a little office in an inner city suburb of Toowong, next to Brisbane City. The gentleman had written, do you want to earn $250,000 a year, have great work-life balance, which was a stitch up, but I believed it. So I was like, yeah, that's me. I would love to have that sort of opportunity. So I tried to make contact with this guy. I called him, left messages for him, wouldn't respond to any of it, sent him an email. And back then, emails, you have to get up on your dial-up internet, and it was different to today. You don't just get on your phone and send it. Wouldn't respond to anything. I think I made 6 or 7 attempts to make contact without a single reply. And then I sent him a cheeky text message and said, hey, are you looking for someone who understands the art of persuasion? I was like, well, I don't know what I was talking about. I was just talking rubbish. But I had to come up with something creative, and it resonated with him. So he engaged with that, and he said, yeah, come and talk to me. At that point, I didn't own a car. I didn't own a proper suit. So I put on a jacket way too big for me. I put on a Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck tie. It was ridiculous that I even wore that thing. And I had to borrow my dad's van, Mitsubishi Express van, and look in the Refidex, as we called it, or the UBD, which was our sort of Google Maps of back in the days, and find where this suburb was that I'd never sort of really known. So I went to the meeting, rocked up, and he's like, well, you know, you don't have the experience, so I can't put you in sales. But if you want to get into the industry, you can be my assistant. You impress me with your persistence, and you can just do whatever jobs we give you. Put up rental signboards, drop off keys, do rental inspections, you know, take photos of properties. Back then, we used to take all our own photos. We had an SLR camera in the office. You would take the SD card with you, take the photo, bring it back to the office. So I said, yeah, I'll take that job. But I didn't have a car. So to get to work, I had to walk to the bus stop, catch a bus from Holland Park to Coorparoo train station, then catch the train from Coorparoo to Central Station in the city, and then get off, catch another train from Central to Toowong, and then walk from Toowong Station to the office. So it took me an hour and 45 minutes every morning to get to work, and similar to get back. So it was a I wouldn't say it's a struggle, but it was certainly, there was more challenge then than there is now. And I always look back at those moments to remind me, hey, you've got it good, man. You know, you're sitting in a car, you've got an air-conditioned car, you're comfortable, you're not catching 3 different public transport modes to get into the office. You know, everything's so much easier now. And I've got to have a greater appreciation for that, because I've gone through the other side to some degree. But that was how I started. For the first 6-8 months, all I did was help everyone else in the office. And then eventually he said, look, you can get into sales. I had no listings, I had no track record. I was very young, still inexperienced. He gave me a list of open house people that had inspected, hard copy. It was probably like, I don't know how high, 40, 50 centimeters high, and 5, 6, 7 years old. Like, it was years and years old. No one had called through the list. So I just sat down day after day and went through that entire list, cleaned it up, and turned, I would say, 5 to 10% of that list into potential buyers. Hardly any sellers, but 1 in 10 at best was looking to buy something or looking to buy something else, because it'd been so long since they had seen it before. I ended up really over-servicing buyers for the first year of my career, just keeping in touch with them, building relationships. I ended up selling 56 properties in that year, but that was not my listings. There are generally other agents' listings in the office that I would introduce the buyer to and get a small slice of the commission. And then eventually those buyers turned into homeowners and sellers, and they came back to me, and I started to build a real estate business from there on. So that's a short background of how I got into the industry, and that was back in 1999.
That is cool, pretty impressive from where you come from to where you are. And the beautiful thing is, like, you know, you never forget where you come from. Can I double click one more thing? Like, we was parents, where did they migrate from originally? I want to know.
So I was born in Iran, in the capital city of Tehran. My parents and I left the country in 1987, and my dad was a political prisoner in Iran, so he couldn't get a passport or a visa to get out. He had to pay people smugglers to get him through the border into Pakistan. My mum and I didn't know if he had made it. We flew to Singapore, and then we flew from Singapore to Pakistan to then try and find my dad. And that's how we sort of ended up coming here. We stayed in Pakistan for 9 months, very fortunate to get the opportunity to come to Australia. We were offered Australia or Netherlands, and we chose Australia because I was watching Skippy the bush kangaroo on TV, and that's sort of what prompted my parents to choose Australia, because we had both opportunities to go to either country. And we came here as political refugees in 1987 or 88, late 87. And it was a struggle, mate. And my parents, I would say, are still living a very sort of humble life in a sort of a low socioeconomic life. But it taught us a lot to be grateful for, and just to live in this country is a blessing. So whatever happens, we're happy to be here.
Love it, man. I'm pleased we got you here to Australia. Hey, we can start speaking Farsi now, because I migrated from Afghanistan, so we can speak. We'll forget about speaking English now, huh?
Yeah, no one else will understand a word that we say, though. But it's good to be reminded of your past, I think, because sometimes you take for granted what you have in this world. And for me, in this industry, we've got such a great opportunity beyond any other industry. There's nowhere else that you can come into with no education, really, with no track record, with no backing, with no financial sort of, I guess, history, and then suddenly do quite well, whether it takes you a year or 10 years. The opportunity is there for everyone. And this industry, we're very fortunate to have that opportunity. And I try and train my team that way, is to firstly acknowledge the opportunity, recognize what you have. Because if you don't recognize it, you're probably not going to take advantage of it. But what I find in this industry is often people take it for granted for the time that they're in the industry. Then they leave, whether it's they decide to go to another profession or they stop working because they've retired. And then they look back and go, wow, that was a pretty unique opportunity. Like I could have really done well. But that's too late then. So you've got to appreciate the opportunity now. We're very lucky to be where we are. And even in a slowing market that we're experiencing in Brisbane, and so are other cities, Sydney, Melbourne, in New Zealand, similar, everywhere's weakening. It's still not a bad market comparative to some other markets in the world. It's still a reasonably okay market to trade in. I think it's going to get worse. I don't think this is the end, but I don't think it's a bad market. I've spoken to agents in the US that would do an open house for 3 months and get 2 people through. Like, you know, we never have that in our country. So just to be grateful for what we have and then take advantage of the opportunity, because it's a short time frame that we're on this earth for. And if you don't take advantage of it, you're going to miss it. And I think you'll look back and regret. That's the way I feel. Anyway.
I agree, man. I agree. I was going with that colleague of mine who walking around Hagley Park, with a beautiful park here. And I was telling Jeannie that I come from a third world country, so I really appreciate how beautiful the city is, right? And I think everybody should have the immigrant's mindset. I think just to remember how lucky we are to live here. We can talk about this all day, but I want to double click on what you're about and how we got from when you started in the business. You said you sold 56 properties. Was it the first year, or was it that?
It's the first year that I got into sales. So I was in a supportive role for the first 6 to 7 months. And then they let me get into sales, and it was for that first year of sales that I had 56 sales, but not listings. You know, that I only had a few listings. The sales were just servicing buyers, introducing them to properties and putting deals together that way. And that's something that I think is probably not done very well in today's world, because the buyers just come to you from your internet advertising and you sort of get a bit lazy in servicing them. But it's a good reminder to go back to the basics sometimes.
For sure. And then you're working in someplace else, and you did okay, but then you're thinking about leaving the industry, right? And we so pleased that you didn't leave. But tell me about that, like, you know, what happened, like what kind of numbers you were doing back then, and the shift to the new to McGrath, and why?
Yeah, so there was a number of reasons. I think real estate can be a psychologically challenging industry to be in, because there's a lot of ups and downs. You're constantly going through, you know, positives in terms of sales and results, and then negatives in terms of missed opportunities and crash deals and failures. So it's a roller coaster ride, and you've got to try and, I guess, maintain an equilibrium of just being balanced and not getting caught up in the emotion too much. Otherwise, you're gonna find it very difficult, because there's always going to be challenges. Doesn't matter who you are. You can be number one in the world or in the country or in your network. You're still going to lose at times. You're still going to get things wrong. I do anyway. So what changed for me, mate? I was in the industry between 99 and 2011. And during that time, I had enough opportunity to do well, but I never did. Why not? I can make excuses. The bottom line was I was probably lazy. I didn't research what I needed to do well. I was just following what others in my office were doing. And there was no high performance for the first 12 years of my career, really. I wasn't exposed to anyone doing 1 million GCI for that first 12 years. You know, the best performers were writing 200-300, and that was the benchmark. And it's an important lesson, is to make sure that you surround yourself with more successful people, or those that are performing well, because it's a paradigm shift. It's a psychological barrier that I had set up in my own mind, that $1 million was just unattainable. So don't even think about it. And I didn't even go and research. I didn't go and fly to Sydney or Melbourne or or look at agents in Brisbane that were really performing well and sat down to interview them and speak with them. And I should have. So for the first 12 years of my career, I couldn't get over 500 GCI. I was targeting too many homes, 20,000 properties across 4 suburbs. I was doing it inconsistently, doing a letterbox drop once every month, 2 months, 3 months, and then not having any money. It was a transactional style of business where wasn't an attraction business. I wasn't getting called in hardly at all. It was me having to generate the lead through letterbox drops or calls or however it might be. And then if I was lucky, I would get a lead, a listing opportunity. I would go and list it, sell it. And this sort of transactional style of business was a difficult time for me because I never really felt comfortable. I never could sit there and say to myself, things will come to me, business will come to me. I had to keep pedaling, keep hustling just to get by. And 2011 in Brisbane, we had some flooding, a very major flood event in Brisbane. At that point, I was working in the flood-prone areas, and a lot of the listings that I had were impacted. I lost those sales. The listings and the pipelines dried up because the streets were a mess. Houses were still being repaired. And I was financially in a difficult position. Now, my parents, just to give you the idea, they're not well off. In 2022, beginning of this year, they owed more on their mortgage than when they started the mortgage in 2000. And that's because they've been borrowing against the equity with a line of credit for their living expenses. So it was I was going to them hat in hand for money back in 2011, because I had no money to pay for my rent, my car repayments, and so on. So I went there and I borrowed a very small amount off them. They borrowed against their mortgage. They lent it to me. I paid off my expenses, living costs. And I thought to myself, this is probably not the industry for me. I've tried this. I've tried it for 12 years. I'm obviously not very good at it. The floods were a negative thing, but overall, I wasn't performing well enough to say that I'm going to get over this, because after 12 years, I was still struggling to live. Yeah. So I wanted to leave the industry. I was looking at jobs online, pharmaceutical rep or whatever job I could really get. And if something good came to me back then, Nathan, I would have probably taken it. If someone had said, I'll give you 80 or 100 grand a year and a little bit of a bonus package, I probably would have taken that job. And I'm so glad I didn't get offered that job, because it wouldn't have been the right decision for me now looking back. So that was it was a moment of hitting a brick wall. 2 reasons. One was a financial issue that I was in 2011. The second was a health diagnosis that I was given in 2011. And that for me was probably one of the best things that happened to me. That felt like probably one of the worst things that could happen to me. And I went to the doctors. I had Crohn's disease, which is a bowel issue. Then they said, I've got another condition called ankylosing spondylitis, which is arthritis of the spine. And eventually you become a hunchback and you can't drive. And the doctor said at that time, in 11, you should look for another job, because in 10 years' time, you won't be driving a car or tying up your shoelace. And at that point, I believed the doctor. And my disease has progressed, and I can't turn my neck much, like I can't look up much, and there's issues there, and I'm fusing in the spine. But that diagnosis in 2011 was a brick wall that I think I needed to hit, because at that point, time became a very precious commodity. The option of just cruising and letting things happen by themselves was no longer an option for me. I had to look at things differently. So everything that I needed to do became a non-negotiable. The prospecting, the cold calling, the hustle and the effort that goes into getting business, the mindset of getting somewhere was completely rejigged after that meeting with the doctor. So I thought, okay, I've got to find a new way of doing this. And I thought, well, I want to get into a better area, in a better market. I was in a brand that wasn't giving me much opportunity in that mid to high end. I was sort of getting caught up in the low end units. And I found that McGrath was in Brisbane for a couple of years at that point. And I thought, okay, maybe these guys obviously dominate the high end. And when I started with McGrath about 9 years ago, the top 100 agents in Australia, I think 47 were McGrath agents. So it was a very dominant agency, and it still is, but it was hugely dominant. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start with these guys. I couldn't get my head around why they did so well, because they were paying 50% commission with a slight uptick, whereas I was at Remax getting 92% commission. So I was like, okay, well, I have to step down from 92 to 50 or 60, depending on what you write. And that was a bit of a psychological shift as well for me, mate. But I made that decision to change agency. And then I looked at what these agents in Sydney were doing, some of the guys in our network that were writing big numbers. And I just studied their businesses a little bit. And I noticed there's a trend in what they do. They're very narrowly focused. They're specialists in their area. They have dominant market share in the suburbs that they target. And they all have attraction businesses where the consumer is going to them and asking them to come and appraise their home. So they're on the shopping list of 7, 8 out of 10 listings. I thought, that makes sense. How do they get there? And then I noticed rather than looking after 20,000 homes, they were doing like 1,200, 1,500 or 2,000 homes. And that was completely different to what I had done for 12, 13 years. So that was probably a pivotal moment of change in my thinking. And I went from 20,000 properties to 770. So I took a quarter of one suburb, which was very difficult to do psychologically because I felt like by doing that, I'm going to miss a lot of opportunity on the other areas that I used to sort of target. But it was the right decision because I became very consistent. I put beautiful content out there. So market reports, letterbox drops, everything was done consistently to a high caliber. I then started to meet the neighbors. I door knocked a market report to each 772 homes that I had put together, and slowly started to build a profile of credibility in the marketplace. And it was one opportunity, one single opportunity that made my career. In this section of real estate that I was targeting, there was a property that had been on the market with Ray White for a long time. I think it was close to a year, hadn't sold. I door knocked it and he said, talk to me, come and see me at my cafe at the shopping center. So I went and met with the guy. I hadn't had any listings in that area, 0 market share, 0 track record. This was a house, 5 times over what my sort of sale price was. I was in the low-end unit market, but I had to plead with him hand on heart at that point that I'll make a bigger effort than anyone else, and I'll be looking after his interests more than anyone else would be willing to do, and I'll work harder than anyone else is willing to do as well. And he gave me that chance, and I got lucky. I sold it within a few days. And then I door knocked that sale. I got him to write a testimonial. I door knocked the testimonial and the just sold brochure to all of those 770 homes. Another guy goes, I'm thinking about selling. Come and see me tonight. Went and saw him that night. I ended up listing that one. And then that was it. That was just sort of that one property. It sort of snowballed, and I kept on leveraging off each outcome, making sure that the entire community was aware of the result, and met more people, got more text messages into my phone or phone numbers so I can text message them, and it became somewhat of a sort of a authority or at least known name in that area after a few months. And then we got to 68% market share in that area after about 18 months. And then I thought, well, that worked. This is a sort of the concept is effective. It works. Let me scale this. Let me take this same model, same business model, and try and target neighboring suburbs and bring on new team members that can help me achieve that. And that's all we've done since then. All we've done is scaled that same business model of high quality content given to them very frequently, consistently, and communicating with the area as frequently as we can through text messaging, through calling, and then starting to build market share. And then slowly, once we've got market share, we become visible, we become credible, and we scale that same business model in neighboring suburbs.
I love this, man. I love this. Every single is there's some amazing word of wisdom, like you're talking about. Your parents obviously started from nothing. They lend you money, so you had this thing that you had this burning desire in you to make things happen, like make sure you become successful. You got diagnosed with autoimmune disease, gift badly wrapped, like you said. You got to change the mindsets, because real estate business is more psychological than anything else. You did say one of the things which it's so true in every successful person's life or business, heroes and mentors. You said if you hang out with losers, you become one of them. If you want to change, go to the next level, you need to go hang out with better people, right? Which I love. You see, also specializing in an area, become an attraction business rather than transactional business. Having 770 properties, now you're just expanding that. How often do you communicate with the area? AJ?
Yeah, I mean, as frequently as we can, because really frequency of contact is what builds trust. And Nathan, you can do all these things, but ultimately, one of the most important elements in this industry is building relationships with people. Ultimately, it's the relationship with that person that's likely to give you the opportunity. Now, you can be the best in the world, but if you don't have a strong relationship, you'll probably miss the opportunity. So relationship ranks quite highly. I would say even beyond skill, because there's a lot of highly skilled agents that don't get much opportunity because they don't build strong relationships. So, and how do you add relationships? How do you build relationships? It's frequency of contact. And I find text messaging is a sort of a passive way, but you could personalize it. I don't think any mass text messaging, mass email is effective in today's world, because I think the consumer is bombarded by that mass approach and they're not very responsive to it. It just gets put into the junk folder or I'm not interested folder. Whereas when you can personalize it and say, hi, Nathan, hope all is well. Good to chat with you a couple of weeks ago regarding this or that, or hope your dog feels better, whatever the conversation was. I've just noticed this one's been listed around the corner from you, and we'll keep you posted on the outcome. And that's it. I don't ask for anything. I just send that text, I personalize it and send it to the people in that area. And ultimately, it's really important that every conversation we have, whether we're having the conversation with a seller, a buyer, a pipeline seller, a tenant, that we're adding some value to their life, that we're really giving them something that is of benefit to them, whether it's sharing information that's informative. And it's important that agents become a little bit more skilled in this industry. I think the old school way of just sort of winging it is no longer effective. You've got to get a little bit of knowledge around the economy, interest rates, inflation, the historic trends of asset prices, what's happened in previous market corrections. These conversations are very important, because if you want to be the trusted advisor, if you want people to take your advice, first you've got to know what you're talking about. We can't just be giving advice without knowing it ourselves. So it's important for the agent to become a bit more skilled in that regard. So for me, when I talk to the team, you can do all of these things right, but if you have bad conversations with people, if you don't add value to the conversation, if you don't leave a positive impression on them, I think you're not going to get anywhere. I think that's really important. So even if you don't have skill, let's say you've just come into the industry, you can build relationships. You can build a relationship with no skill, in my experience. So for me, agents need to really sharpen up on that. Is, hey, are you building trust with this person? How frequently are you in contact with them? Are you giving them information that's relevant to them, that's selfless? You're not trying to get something out of it. It's just bringing value to them, because ultimately that's what's going to build the relationship. And whether they sell in 6 months, a year, or 5 years, if you've maintained that, you're on the shopping list at least. But if you haven't been there, then you may not be. So our job is to build those relationships with every person in our area. And even if it's a tenant, let's not categorize people too much, because the tenant of today is the buyer of tomorrow, and the buyer of today is the seller of tomorrow. It's the same person at a different stage of their life. And all you've got to do is leave a positive impression on every interaction that you have. And for me, that's really vital.
I love this, because it used to be that fast talking, hard salesperson that cut people's throats and step on people's toes. They become successful. But today, the person that cares the most, and of course knows, wins. Like you just summed it up beautifully. Creating a relationship is absolutely important. That's the first thing. But then when you walk in, they want to deal with somebody who is an expert, knows what the hell they're talking about. John McGrath, who's a mutual friend of ours, John said to me a long time ago when I visited him in Sydney, he said, people want to know how much you care, and then they want to know how good you are.
Yeah.
If you tick those two boxes, then success is inevitable.
And caring's so important, mate, because the person you're dealing with needs to know that you're on their side, and you're on their side beyond what's beneficial to you. So if the advice is don't sell, and let's hang on to this and let's look at selling it at the next cycle, that for me is selfless advice that the person will receive in a very positive manner. So it's important that they know that you care, because if they feel that you're just doing it for yourself, I think that relationship is not going to grow strongly. The other thing, Nathan, is the industry's changed, mate, completely changed. Back when I first started real estate in 1999, if you had a suit and could string half a sentence together, you're in with a chance of getting the listing. And that's because there was no visibility of track record. There was no online search. You could never see who sold what. It was really based on who was there on the day, who showed up. Maybe you had some signboards in the area. That's probably how you build profile, maybe some letterbox drops, but no one could Google you and say, well, Nathan sold 20 properties, 50 properties, 100 properties. Now they can. And I find that agents that have already sort of established themselves are benefiting from this new world that we live in because their track record is visible. New agents coming in will find it a little bit harder to break into the market because they don't have the track record, and the consumer can just Google them and see how you've sold nothing. But those agents have two options, I think. One is they team up with someone to try and get some exposure experience and build some track record, or they need to have a very heartfelt, hand-on-heart pitch to the vendor to get the opportunity and start that way. Because that's what I had to do. I had no track record or right to get that listing in that pocket of Indooroopilly. I had to go hand on heart. I'm willing to do this, this, and that for you. Yeah. And that opportunity is what then sort of led me to other deals after that.
Man, I'm so pleased the industry has changed because the good guys, the great people, they actually now come first, right? Because it's so visible, like you said, you can't be lying to people and just scratching sales together anymore and still become successful long term. Short term you might do it, but long term it's almost impossible. Which I'm so grateful for, like having amazing people like you become successful. Actually teaches the industry that you can be a nice, decent human being and still be super successful. Tell me, I just want to double click on what your day looks like, because I know you do that. Some things that I'm really into, like the morning routine things, and I really want to know and its importance in setting you up for the day.
Yeah, I think mindset's really important to maintain, and everyone's different, mate. Some people are very good at dealing with negativity in their life. They can manage it well. They don't get anxious. They don't get stressed. They don't get depressed. And they operate at a very sort of comfortable, relaxed level always. And I see those people and I go, wow, that's amazing that you can do that. I'm a little bit different to that. Sometimes I take things to heart, which I shouldn't. I get emotional and I need to maintain my energy and my mindset. And the way I do that is the number of things I do as a routine or a ritual, you could call it. And a lot of them are just to try and clear my mind and have a focused sort of approach to my day. One of them is meditation. I'm not good at it, so I don't want to sort of be talking about it as if I'm sort of any benchmark of meditation. I've been doing it for a long time and I'm still below average at it, but it's something that I'll continue to do because I think it helps me. So in the mornings, I will look at the sunrise, the days that I can when there's no clouds, and then I will listen to a 10-minute morning meditation, which is on YouTube. And that's something that it's a guided meditation. Just do breathing exercises during that and manifestation, visual sort of stuff. And I do that every morning to calm the mind, peace, sort of bring peace to my day. I find it helps me a lot. And I do cold showers every day, twice a day, mornings and afternoons when I get home at nighttime. I've done that as a religion or very sort of routinely for many, many years. I find that anytime you can push yourself beyond your comfort zone, whatever that is, whether it's going and doing an exercise routine that's sort of challenging, you don't feel like it, or getting into a cold shower where every cell of your body says, don't do this. I think those things that you do in life will strengthen your mind and your mindset, and you come out of them better, stronger, and you find that everything else is easier. So if I can make my mornings a little bit more challenging, rather than being comfort zone, if I can push myself beyond my comfort, I find that the next challenge that comes to me is much easier to deal with. And this is a stoicism or stoic mindset, you could call it. A bunch of guys talk about this stuff. John's talked about it. And it falls into that category, I think, is to do things that are not comfortable, that are beyond your sort of normal capacity, but that you come out of it going, yeah, that wasn't that bad. Actually, I can do that. So there's a couple of things I do. I do saunas to manage my inflammation, and it helps with stress levels as well. So, little things like that. I listen to a lot of podcasts in the car. I'm always listening to Audible books and so on. I think everyone should follow their passion. I enjoy reading about the financial markets and the economy and history and those things. So that's what I'm sort of looking at the moment. But no, mate, I'm no example of anyone that does anything special. There's a lot of agents that do a lot more, and I mean, they're probably good examples of someone to follow, not myself.
No, but I know what you mean. But those important things like meditation to calm your mind up, mind down, and make sure everything is under control. I think those are things that are important stuff. And cold showers, I do, and I love it. Not just because it's so good for your health wise. It's actually, like you said, it's doing something that scares you at the start of the day, the restart of the day, like, you know, making a phone call, being rejected is not a big deal, is it, AJ?
No, man, that's the same with everything. I think if you start the day wrong, if you wake up late, you eat a really crappy breakfast, sugar and bad choices, I find the rest of the day your decisions are compromised because the mindset is I've stuffed it up already. There's no point making it better now. I'll start tomorrow. So let's start it good and then make the right decisions throughout the day. It's a much better way to be. And I find it's much easier to live that way, mate. I don't want to live in regret. That's important. And anytime I make the wrong decision, if I want that short-term pleasure, whatever the decision is, I find I have regret afterwards. So delay the gratification, do the hard thing first, and then enjoy later on. And that mindset, I think, is a much better way to live.
Love it, man. And you offer, you still prospect. I'm assuming you do prospect. You got time period that you prospect.
Yeah, prospecting, I think, look, depends on what you define as prospecting, but yes, all of us prospect. Each team member has a designated area that their job is to build relationships there and get me in the door. And we go in and list the property together and split the fee, split the commission. I do the same in my area. I'll be texting people, calling people, keeping in touch with them. It's just maintaining relationships. But it's sort of funny. I don't call it prospecting. I find that sometimes prospecting has a negative connotation attached to it. As soon as I use the word prospecting, in my team, everyone starts to get a bit defensive and, oh no, feeling of guilt. And, I think the industry is attached a negative connotation to prospecting, like it's hard work and negative. And so we don't even call it prospecting. I mean, it's just normal day-to-day life. Have you kept in touch with your area? Have you followed up with these guys? Have you checked in with them? Have you sent the text about this sale that we've had to everyone in the area? I try not to use that word prospecting too much, only because the definition that we've given to it in the industry. I just find that as soon as you use that word, everyone's like, oh shit, I didn't do enough of that. Or,
relationship building, let's call it that, huh?
Yeah, but build relationships, it's common sense. Like, all we're doing is we're communicating relevant information with the consumer. It's very basic stuff. You've got to find the consumer, you meet them at the open house. When you meet them at the open and they come through and say, hey, we're neighbors from this street or that street, my job is to get them on my phone. I don't even have a very well structured database. We use Agent Box, but we don't utilize it as well as we should. Everything's on my iPhone. I just save that person's number with some emojis. If they're a homeowner, I will have a picture of a house and then their name and address. If they're a homeowner that's looking to sell in the next 6 to 12 months, it'll be a picture of a house and a flame, so hot seller, and their name and address. And that way, it's easy for me to get access to it. If I've just sold something in that suburb and I need to find out who else I need to contact, I'll just put house emoji and the suburb name, and everyone comes up. I've got 100 people. And now I can send them text messages or whatever I choose to do to keep in touch with them. So for me, mate, the word prospecting, I think we all should be doing it. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but not to attach a negative connotation to it, because it's a pretty easy, relaxed task. It's nothing profound, mate. Like, there's a lot harder jobs out there. And I think when people make real estate look hard, it makes everything look hard, because real estate's really not hard. It's mentally challenging, but so is any other industry.
Yeah. I love it. Give me a breakdown of your team and what it looks like now.
So it's very geographically driven. I'm lead agent for every listing that comes on in our areas. I've got other agents that have teamed up with me to focus on neighboring suburbs. So I've got myself, I've got a Nathan as well, who's my brother-in-law, who works with us and looks after St. Lucia. So we've got a Nathan in our team. We've got Adriana, who's joined us from Ray White, and she looks after another suburb or two suburbs, Chelmer Graceville. And we've got Georgia, Georgia's also come to us from Ray White, and she had, I think, 9 years experience as a sales agent before she joined us. So a lot of these agents have come to us with 5-10 years experience joining the team. And she does another 2 suburbs called Corinda and Sherwood. And then we've got a new team member that's joined us, Zach. And Zach is doing suburbs, Chapel Hill, Kenmore, and beyond. So he's going a bit further from the city. And that's our main team model, with our assistant admin support, whose name is Kaya. And Kaya looks after our contracts by DocuSign, does a lot of our back-end marketing, putting listings on, and all that sort of jazz behind the scenes, CMAs, listing presentations she puts together, and so on. I do get the agents involved in the listing presentations. I don't like to outsource the comparative market analysis or the relevant sales list, because I find that if the agent doesn't do it themselves, that they really don't know what they're talking about when we get into that listing presentation. So rather than outsource it to the admin lady and say, hey, just give me a listing presentation for this property, I have the agent themselves do the relevant sales list, so they can put together all the sales, what the configuration was, what the land size was, so that when we are in the living room, they know how to have an intelligent conversation, because they did that work themselves. So that's sort of our structure. And then we've got a gentleman by the name of Jordan, who does sort of an assistant role. He helps me and supports me. He's got an area that he wants to target himself. He's a younger agent, he's a junior agent, but his main role is to support us with inspections, and he will start building market share in an area that he's focusing on, which is a bit outside our target area. So that's sort of a loose structure. Last year, the numbers that we wrote were with myself and 3 other sales agents. So it was 4 sales agents and 1 admin agent was the total team size last year.
Nice. That's absolutely phenomenal. AJ, I appreciate that. One of the things that, before I bring Kylie in, because Kylie, our head of sales support, want to chat with your amazing sales assistant and admin support, Kaya, you just paid off your parents' mortgage. I love the beautiful video that you sent me, and man, that was absolutely amazing. Tell me more about that, please.
Oh, it was, I find that when I do something for others, I feel better than when I do it for myself. The greatest gift in life, I think, is giving to others. That feels, for me, the satisfaction I get from that is beyond anything that I could have done for myself. So my parents, in January, February this year, they had a loan with Westpac, interest-only loan, for the last 20-something years that they borrowed against, and created a bigger debt than what they started with, which is very strange. Normally you'd pay your mortgage off in that time. But what happened was Westpac came to them and said, no more interest only, it's principal and interest. And the issue for them was they didn't have the income to be able to do principal and interest, and their repayments would have multiplied. So they basically came to me and said, we've got to sell our property and we're going to move into a unit. They didn't ask me for sort of, anything. They didn't expect anything. And that gave me the perfect opportunity to get involved and help them, mate. And that, at that point, I had a decent year, as most of us did in this industry. And that's what prompted the decision to sort of get involved. I surprised them. So I just found out what their debt was with Westpac. Yeah. And then I pretended that I'm just going to help them get another loan. Because they were too old. The banks are not going to lend them money. They didn't have much of an income. They had to go principal and interest because you have to pay it off. So they weren't going to get a loan. But I just sort of, without giving it away, got the details of their loan, the exact amount that they owed. I went to my finance broker just to see what the deal was. He agreed, yeah, you're not going to get much out of this. They're not going to lend money willy-nilly on that, because their income was very, very low. So I went to the bank. I found out the bank details. I made a check out to pay off their mortgage, transferred the money, and then went and surprised them and said, your mortgage is paid off. So it was a real great blessing. And for me, it was probably the most, I guess, happiest feeling I've had from doing something for anyone was this. And they're forever grateful, mate. Like they'll never forget that gesture. And I could have done other things with the money. I could have paid off my own mortgage. I could have sort of renovated our kitchen, but those things I don't need and I didn't really want. And for me to, you know, my parents did everything to get me here. They left their home country without, you know, speaking English fluently. They came here, they struggled. My dad was washing dishes, even though he had a master's degree in occupational health and safety. It wasn't recognized here. So he was a dishwasher at Sultan's Kitchen, which is an Indian restaurant here for a while. And then he was a taxi driver for years, and, you know, worked hard, but for very little money. And they did everything for me. So for me to then enjoy this privileged lifestyle and let them still live in a financially difficult position is not a way I can live. I couldn't watch that, mate. I couldn't live with myself to do that. So if I went and spent the money on myself and bought a new car or did our kitchen or bathroom or whatever it might be, and didn't do that for them, I would have lived with a feeling of guilt that I couldn't sort of deal with personally. So maybe it was selfish what I've done, because it made me feel better too. But I needed to, it was something, it was an opportunity for me to help. And I'm very grateful I had the opportunity, because if I didn't stay with this industry, I don't think I could have done that for them doing any other job.
What a beautiful man. And obviously proud Persian parents, they would never ask you for money, right? There was no way they would have asked.
No, mate, never, no, never, no. I mean, no way, that never. And if I even asked them to say, this is what I'm planning to do, they would have tried to stop it. And even, you know, I see them weekly, and they came over last night. My mum still talks about interest rates and how they've gone up. And she's like, oh, what happens to your mortgages? And interest rates have gone up. Do you need us to pay the money back? Like, no, that's done. Interest rates are fine. I've factored that in. We're all good. So she's constantly worried and anxious about me, but that's a normal parent thing. Like, you know, I've got 2 children now, and I constantly worry about them, and I understand that feeling now. But for me, you know, life is short. We're not going to be here long, and, you know, what I've given to them isn't a big deal in terms of
beautiful man.
But the change that it's made in their life has had an impact.
That's cool, man. That's cool. It's in the giving that we receive. I just want to talk about, you got 2 beautiful kids and a wife, and what does your life look like with the family? Like, you know, how do you spend time with them? I'm curious before I get Kylie in to ask questions from Kaya.
I try and spend as much time with my kids as I can. It's an industry that's difficult to do that in. You've got to, I think, be willing to accept the sacrifices that come with it. This is not a Monday to Friday 9 to 5. You know, a lot of the deals that are happening and the conversations are happening between 5 and 8 o'clock. So there is a lack of balance in my life that for a while I've tried to address, and I still am consciously making an effort to do that. I try and take a few days break every school holidays to go away with them, spend some time with them. I try and switch off, but sometimes it's difficult to completely disconnect when there's things happening in the background. But all of that sacrifice comes with the benefit of what we can earn and what we can provide. So for me, it's a balance of being more focused with my children, spending more time with them, and actually focusing on them, because often I'm at home and I'm pretending to be there, and I actually go home as early as I can to try and show my wife that I'm making an effort. But then in reality, I'm actually not there. I'm disconnected. I'm thinking about something else. I'm on my phone the whole time, texting and emailing and calling. And my wife actually says, well, you may as well stay at work, because the kids are trying to talk to you and you're not even responding to them, or you are with a blank face and not really hearing them. So that's something I'm still working on, but that's the sacrifice we make. And I've got a very understanding wife. She's at home. She looks after the kids. And we're fortunate to have that set up. But I think in reality, if there was an option for me to change something in my life, it would be more time with family, disconnecting from phone, because the phone seems to be a sort of a burden that I carry with me everywhere. But that's a rough sort of indication of how we live. There's 2 children, both are at school. We put them in private school. All these things could not have happened without the real estate industry.
Love it, man. To your success, man. I think you deserve everything that you do, everything that you've done. And like you said, it's cool to be able to give back to the family or to the community or whatever it may be, because you get more reward from it. It's what I call a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you feel good about yourself, and it just goes round and round and round. AJ, I appreciate your time, man. You're just an absolute legend. I can't wait to come and see you up in Brizzy sometime very soon.